Why not? What's happening? How are you?
I'm good, Carl. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to have you. As I mentioned before we jumped on, the first time I met you was in Korea at R16,
Hmm.
and I wasn't just impressed with your name. I thought your name was really cool, but I also thought that the way that you moved was something that I had never seen in my life up until that point, and really inspired to just have seen you over the years, heard your name, and now yeah, be able to talk to you. So thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've also heard a lot about you too, Carl. So it's exciting to sit in here and talk to you. And I know we met in R16, but through the years also with a couple friends that I have, your name's been mentioned, and I know you've been working a lot with a lot of breakers. So this will be a really really cool time to get to know what you're doing as well.
Very, very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
breaking has been very impactful in my life, and as cliche as it sounds, it's not something that I chose. It just kind of happened to appear in my life. I thought I was very attracted to it. I was very inspired by it. And the people in the scene, just a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to the creative expression.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's what you have clearly dedicated your life to, and that's what I would like to explore today. So for those who and this is one of those things that you hear in podcasts. You hear people say, hey, can you give us a description of who you are, where you come from? I don't really want to know your life history at this moment. We can talk about it, but I do want to know, uh if you see yourself as an artist, what is art to you?
Expression, being able to translate certain thoughts, feelings, emotions into art, or into some sort of medium, I would say, because especially for me, I speak across different ways of creating, not just dance, but visual art, music, stuff like that. So I also feel like there's no limit to how that looks or how that works. And but I mean that's it. I think ultimately it's sharing this kind of thought and putting it in some sort of like either frozen moment or moving picture, for other people to experience as well. And there's people that either share that sentiment or you turn them on to something new. You can kind of teach by doing this. You can kind of you know give some insight of some type of moment in history, and that stuff lives on. I mean, our art lives on beyond our physical selves. So I think it's really powerful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear that, because art as an expression means that they're kind of like no rules, yet you do need some formal training at times. There are certain techniques, methods, ways that are formalized that facilitate the expression of art. It Was that breaking for you? Was that playing the saxophone early on? Was it playing the drums? Like, what was it for you, as a
I think,
musical artist, especially right now?
yeah, I think in the beginning, actually, it was probably visual first. It was visual first. I learned this whole concept of manifestation really early, um, when I realized that I can take a picture that I see in my mind and put it on paper, and trying to get that picture as clear as possible as to the way I see it in my mind was the skill, right? I have to learn how to
Mhm.
draw. I have to learn how to be better at this hand-eye coordination, to create this thing that's in my mind. I think that's pretty much where it started. From then, it was like music. I've found music to be a similar experience because I would hear certain sounds and I would want to create them. I just kind of gravitated towards the saxophone because like that was my favorite sound at that time. I listened to a lot of Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane, that type of thing. So tenor saxophone to me was just a beautiful sound. And then I got to a point too where that felt a little bit limiting at moments, and then I got into more of like electronic music, where I was able to kind of like spread out and play along different lines. You know, Tried to learn some piano. I'm still learning piano, and it really helps with composing to be able to speak across the spectrum of the music. Um, and dance eventually became the thing too, because I realized, like, through this, and I was speaking about the hand-eye coordination with the drawing, like understanding my body was a big part of it. Same thing playing saxophone. I mean, getting the fingerings down for the notes, and understanding how my breath works to make the sounds that I wanted to make. You already start physicalizing the things,
Mm-hmm.
embodying how to do this at a high level. Um, and then dance just became natural too. My mother was a dancer, not professionally, but she just danced all the time. I think that played a big role in me wanting to move my body in that way. Um, and then, yeah, I felt drawn to it when I first saw it. I was super excited about it, and especially breaking. I think tap was the first dance that I thought was really dope, but I never had a chance to do it. I would try, like I put bottle caps on my shoes and was like, messing around, but I didn't know what I was doing. I feel like I didn't know
That's
what I was doing with
hilarious.
breaking either, though. Like even with breaking, I was just imitating tap dancers. I still do
Wow,
that
no
to this day.
way.
Yeah,
Okay. I
yeah,
mean, now that you say that, that makes sense. That is so crazy to think about, which is interesting because that kind of leads me to something that, as you were talking about the visual and bringing what was in your mind and putting it on the paper and having that hand-eye coordination, where having a specific line, the ability to draw a line, a stroke, that creates a signature. I mean,
hmm,
Leonardo da Vinci is famous for having a signature stroke that can be identified on paintings of his students, of him like explaining, hey, if you want to really complete this, you do it something like
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Um, when did you become aware that you were producing a signature style in your expression, whether it was through dance or design? When did you become aware of this?
Um, I think when I started to reach the point of the things I was thinking about, I can actually do them. And what's crazy is I still haven't really gotten to that point fully. And I may never reach that. There's ideas I have in my mind that I may not reach physically, because of now age is creeping in and all this type of stuff. And then, maybe there's things I'm thinking too that just is not physically possible. Which is
Mm-hmm.
why like dance in some ways could be limiting. And that's why I love creating in different ways, because there's some ways I want to speak rhythmically through dance that I can't do. So I do that with music, or I'll do that with a visual art or something like that.
That
But
is very cool.
that's really where I saw it. I was like able to reach a certain moment, on time, you know, express it the way I really felt it. And I had some moments, and I was really excited to see that too. It was a little hard to like watch it. It took me a while to get into like just watching whatever I just did. I started to do battles and stuff, and people would send me the footage and be like, "Yo, this is crazy," and I'm like, I can't watch it. It's weird, like being in a moment and then watching the moment. I had a real hard time with that at first, but then now I'm like, it helped a little bit of my assessment of how I was kind of doing things within the dance. So then I started to watch, and I was learning a lot from watching my own footage after a while.
Is it
Yeah,
kind of like hearing your own voice for the first time, where you're like, "Oh God, what is this?"
absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
insane. And and do you remember your first battle?
Oh man. I remember my first time going into a cipher. I remember that for sure. Battles became so many that I can't even remember what the first one was at this point. Um, but my first time stepping into a cipher was so much anxiety and fear, I think, in the beginning. Even though I was excited to want to get out there and show what I've been doing, right? Because I've been learning the dance, I felt really good about it, and I wanted to express myself, especially to the song that I heard at the time. But I just remember like rushing through everything, just
Wow.
wanting to kind of get it done. Um, but I was really excited out of the reaction that I got, even though I felt like I didn't do my best. That's what I really got from that. Yeah.
Wow. So would you practice at home, or how old were you when you started dancing? And
Yeah.
was it at home you were practicing on your own with friends?
Yeah, I had a really small section of the basement squared off, where I would dance. And this is in New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey. And we had these heaters that were along the bottom side of the floor, and I would constantly kick the the board of the heater off, and my mom would hear that upstairs, and she'd be yelling down, "What are you doing down there?" Um, but yeah, I had a really small space, and that's pretty much where I just felt like I needed to, exercise and practice my craft. And it was interesting too because when I felt at home in a cipher because the size of that was similar, right? People were a little bit
Interesting.
closer to you. I had a lot more kind of control in a smaller space. When I started doing battles and things really started getting big, in the scene, I remember being you know, in a space that just was way too large for me to even understand. So I would go out to do my battle and I would really battle in a contained space. I wouldn't really go too far out of that. And it took me a while to start to use the space a little bit differently. Um, but yeah, I would practice there basically in my basement for years. I started really dancing, I'd say, when I was like 13, 14 years old. Um, I was already kind of like moving around and messing around with it, but I think I consciously started practicing the dance at 14.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting age. So, like, you're becoming a teenager. You're self conscious. You have a lot of thoughts going on in your mind. You're really starting to discover the world, and then you're finding dance,
Hmm.
which is such an interesting path. What was it like for your mother, for example? I don't know if your father was around at that time or not, but he wasn't around. But what
No.
was it like for your mother when she saw you pursue dance? Was it something that she encouraged because she danced, or was it kind of like, "Hey, get to school"?
Yeah, she was very much trying to get me to think about what I want to do as a career. She didn't see dance as a career. And she didn't really know what I was doing for a few years. I also kind of hid it from her because I would travel to the Bronx to dance and I would go to New York to dance. And she's from Brooklyn originally. My father's from the Bronx. When they had me, they moved to Jersey. And one of the reasons was because they were trying to, move into a better location, see if they can find better education for me and my sister. Um, but the idea of going to the city was not really a thing. They were like, don't go there, especially by yourself, right? So I traveled to Hunts Point, at the Point, which was a community center where I learned how to break, and that's where I met Crazy Legs and a lot of other members of Rocksteady. So I was already going there about the age of, I would say, towards the end of 15 into 16 years old, when I started to like meet other people and they were telling me like where things were happening. Again, this wasn't like there was no internet. There was no way for me to kind of search these things up at that time. So we're talking like 96, 97 now. Um, and they told me where to go. So, okay, looked it up, found it. How do I get there by train? It was like a whole thing. Ended up going as much as I could. I remember going up there a few times, not even knowing if there was an event or not. And the Point does a lot of really great community work. I mean, I went in there sometimes, and they would have just people in there, or young generation of kids in there drawing and painting. They did a lot of great stuff there. So I found myself just kind of like getting into this whole community space just through visiting that place. I thought it was really cool. Um, but yeah, that was like my early start to things, and it really had me thinking. So even when I went back to my town and started going to high school in Clifton High School in Clifton, New Jersey, I would like I went to the local community center. I started like a practice there, and just tried to get people to break because I was immediate. I don't know what I was. I just really loved the experience I had at the Point that I was like, I'm going to bring this to where I live, and I started to do stuff like that. Yeah, it was really interesting, and there was good group of people that like, went to those practices. And then there was a decent scene that started up in my high school as well from a lot of that too. But people were pretty much into hip hop, like for sure. Like graffiti was a really big thing, around my area, Passaic, New Jersey, Patterson, Clifton, a lot of writers around there. So still a lot of like lingering things from the 80s in terms of like hip hop and breaking, especially. There's almost everybody's uncle or somebody used to break in the 80s. So, you know, if you did any of that, especially during my time and my age, it was shocking to them and exciting because it was considered pretty much dead for a while, especially in that area. So, we were, and by we I say like my generation, were really starting to take interest in something that wasn't very popular at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Which is amazing when you can pick up something that was very special and kind of died off, and then kind of rekindle it and bring it back to life in a new way.
yeah,
So in many ways, you and I'm just projecting here, and I know nothing about hip hop or history and breaking, but my sense is that you definitely influenced and helped pave the way for where breaking is today. And looking back, what are the things that you see marked an inflection point in breaking, and really kind of stuck when you started dancing and really pushing yourself to the level that you were expressing yourself at that time? Yeah, what are some moments or things that you think you did or assisted in doing?
absolutely. Thanks for that, Carl. I appreciate that. Um, I see myself as a product of what I experienced during that time. You know, um, and in some ways, I feel like I was a connection to a scene that was happening, that was connected to something way deeper than the way we might view breaking today. And what I mean by that is that, when I met people like Crazy Legs, for example, um, also in my neighborhood, I met a guy named Fast Eddie who owned a hair salon actually called Headspins. And I actually worked there for a while, because like I needed a work study program for my senior year in high school. And he signed off on all my papers. I ended up working at the hair salon, which was awesome. But Eddie was dope. He was a part of a hip hop crew in the 80s. Through that place, I met a writer by the name of Kel First, who was a really prolific graffiti writer. Also, his brother, Mayor 139, who is one of my mentors today still. Um, I just started getting connected to something that I was super inspired by, but then also after some time, and then even after now the internet started coming into play, I started to actually learn a little bit more of who these people were that I was meeting. I didn't know at first, the impact that they had on hip hop as a whole.
Mhm.
But I was experiencing it firsthand because I was dealing with them in a real personal way, which I also realized a lot of people didn't have that type of opportunity, especially with these guys that I was, hanging out with basically. And I got introduced to a lot of things that were like way beyond my understanding. You know, I mean, I remember like just going to like Zulu anniversaries and meeting all of the Zulus, all of Bambaataa, finding out who the Zulu Nation was, how that was like the real grassroots organization of hip hop in the early days. Meeting a lot of people who were 5%ers at that time, which was my first introduction to understanding what knowledge of self really was. That's a whole thing. We could spend a whole day talking about that, actually.
Yeah, I've learned a
Um,
little bit through Profa One about this, but
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm unfamiliar. I don't have the depth, but I do know what you're talking about. If you want to dive into it a little bit, it is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's really deep. It's a bit of an offshoot of Islamic religion in a way. It's, I call it a street religion, a street knowledge. It was a way for people to really understand the situation that we're in, specifically, black males, I would say. Um, it was a really powerful philosophy, thought process that got people through uh, the hard times of where they were and what they were experiencing. And you see a lot of that today. I mean, the deep philosophy that you know thing had is everything that like really developed into some of the words that we even say in hip hop, like even the word cipher, for example. And I'm talking about Cipher, the way that that's spelled. Most people spell it with a Y. I really don't know where that came from. Um, but cipher meaning a circle, meaning 360 degrees of knowledge. When you look at the first three, pillars of knowledge, wisdom and understanding, that makes a cipher. So really deep numerology type of concepts, stuff like that. Um, but it just puts a really mystical, but um, I think more in depth understanding of why and what. And I've lived by that since I first, really experienced it, and I've continuously like studied it because I think it shows up in everything that I'm doing, and it might go over people's heads, I think, in some way.
Sure.
But especially people who are not necessarily fond of religion. Like I also know, like in today's time, there's a disconnect from movements like that. Um, I'm more of a person who embraces all religion because I see the importance of why people navigate towards something like that or gravitate towards something like that. Um,
Hmm.
it's a way of living and for a lot of people, is survival and an understanding of the things and the people around you. So I get it. So it's stuff like that that really helped kind of shape the way that I was, doing my thing. But I also realized that most of the people that I met, that's what they were studying, thinking, doing. Then there was this whole also art scene that was happening in the 80s that I was super attracted to. So when you talk about what happened in the Lower East Side, most people would refer to that scene as like the Keith Haring Basquiat era. Um, for me, there are other artists like Ramel Z, for example, who were a really big influence on me, who was also a 5%er. And he put a lot of that philosophy into his work. And to me, he is my Basquiat, basically.
Mm.
And I heard his name a lot, as well as people like Don D. And now these are more like graffiti writers, but they're also like Ramel was also an MC. Um, and they were all connected at some point. Phase two is another one. When you start to like really understand like who was doing what their purpose was, especially in who they were in terms of the history of this stuff, it opens up a lot. It's also not information that you can get from anywhere. Some of it is in some books, a lot of it is not.
Hmm.
Ramelzi, for example, is a word that people who are in hip hop deeply, or is a name that people who are in hip hop deeply, they know, um, but it's not a popular name, like a Basquiat, for example. And
Right.
they've crossed
Right.
paths,
That's
which is
amazing.
crazy.
That
Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy. It's crazy to
Mhm.
think about these things, and I just feel very fortunate to have been in the vicinity of these names, and to hear you kind of speak of it now, it just hits me even harder because it feels like an untold history that needs to
Yeah.
come out, and I feel like that's part of what you're doing. And without getting ahead of myself, I was curious about your influences, and you kind of now started to allude to what they are. But as an artist, I think there's a moment where, and I guess as a person, where you say, I'm gonna be influenced up until this point. From here on out, it's me.
Yeah.
Do you have a? I mean, this is a hard question to answer, but do you have a distinct like line where you're like, no, I'm done being influenced. It's time to be why not and just be myself. And now I'm gonna let this just carry, or is it all just one continuum?
I think it's a continuum. I think I've always been myself and still been influenced. I think I just understand ways to take an inspiration, and I respect it so much that I try to find my way in that.
Mm,
I've always thought that way. Um, Never had anyone have to tell me something like that. I understood. It was understood to me that, okay, if this person did this, and I know that they did it, and I saw them do it, and I was inspired by it, I knew I couldn't do anything like that, or at least not too close to it, because that's theirs. And how do I now take this thing that I feel so moved by and put my signature on that, you know,
mm-hmm,
while at the same time understanding, lineage of things as well, and giving respect to those that have really created something before me, because that's a communal way of thinking, though.
mm-hmm,
It is, and it's not so much that you see today. I think I think people have a hard time even mentioning where they may have gotten something or whatever. I have no problem doing that, because I also know that my end product doesn't necessarily look like that, but it feels like that.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
even I can mention all of them, and I have no, it doesn't take anything away from me, and I feel really good about sharing my influences all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
there can be familiarity to it, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, that's in line with," but it's different. It's its
Yeah.
own lane, but it's in the vicinity of. It's familiar to. Yeah, I hear that. You have a very unique aesthetic and style,
Mm.
and I'm wondering if that's something that you deliberately chose or it just kind of happened. And I know it doesn't. It's not something you can compartmentalize or separate. But in your head, when you think about it, were there moments where you're like, "Oh, I see what you look like, how you express yourself. I feel this way. Let me pursue it." Or was it just something that happened naturally for you?
Yeah, I think style is all about choice. It's all about choices you make. It's like we can both order the same, you know, meal, for example. Like if I want to order a cheeseburger and you want to order a cheeseburger, we have the difference in condiments and the stuff we want to add to the cheeseburger, right? That's the way I look at certain genres of things, right? So if we're breaking, we do have all these ingredients we can choose from, but the way that we put those ingredients together changes the flavor, you know. So I know that, moving forward, as I create, I think about those choices. I'm really really now intentional about what those choices are, because a lot of times I might be comparing to what other people are doing or not doing, right? I've seen so much art at this point, and with that being said, I'm pretty well traveled, I would say. I mean, I've been around the world a few times. I know a lot of people say that, but I've definitely been. I mean, I'm on my fifth or sixth passport at this point, and I didn't travel blind, and I mean that by saying, like, I didn't go from the airport to the hotel to the event to the hotel to the airport and go home. There were years I've spent when I would go somewhere, I would on my own money stay a few days longer, just so I can get an idea of the place that I just visited. And what I would do is I would look at museums, I would walk the streets, I would just try to take it all in. And I think when it comes to aesthetics and the choices that I make, they're based on some of the experiences and the things that I've seen. So, they ultimately really influence, what I'm doing. Um, and I still try to, speak from my own voice in conjunction with that. So that's pretty much what that is.
Yeah,
You know?
that's phenomenal. I think being influenced in travel is huge, and you that's I mean that's priceless. You can't put a number on that. So that's a big one. Was there a country in particular or a culture in particular that really caught your attention?
I love Japan. Um, Been there over maybe 40 times. Um, Italy, I spent a lot of time. That's a lot of where my family is from as well. So I got to really experience the art and the culture there more. Which, even I'm saying that, like, where my family is from, like, I'm not very well connected to, you know, my last name like that. So, like, I had to go there and see what that was about. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, ultimately, I'm American, and I realized that while being there too. I think differently. I dress differently. I had a different experience growing up where I grew up. So,
Mm-hmm.
trying to go back to something that you know influences me more genetically, I think, was interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot. I learned a lot from taking frequent trips to Italy. I lived in Malaysia. Southeast Asia had a big impact on me for a while. Um, yeah, I don't know. I would say everywhere, but those three places specifically, I think, really impacted me heavy.
I mean, Japan is one of the few countries, especially when you go to Tokyo, that you arrive and you realize, wow, you have this, like, you, just even the lines that are painted on the streets, just the lines look different. They feel
Hmm.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and how things are just culturally. I mean, like when you walk through the streets of Tokyo, for example, you have, or anywhere too, even Osaka, but they have these, like, this yellow lane that has ridges on it, and those are for people who can't see. Those are for the blind.
Mm-hmm.
When
Mm-hmm.
I spent enough time in Japan, like, design wise, I was really impressed by the way that they think, because they truly uh, served people who were underserved, people who were older, people who had physical issues or ailments. They would design things for them specifically first, because they needed that more than people who are able to do whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
and that's something that I think the Japanese do so well, is that they bring function and aesthetics together in a way. They marry it in a way that just when you're there, when you feel it, you see it, you're just, yeah, you're like, what is this? This is insane.
Yeah.
Which is something that I think you've also done, not only with dance, but for example, I saw the chair that you designed. Did you actually do the woodworking there too, or?
A friend of mine, Van Escobar, who helped me with that aspect of it. So a lot of the ideas, especially like in design, um, we can't do everything, right? Like, I'm not a smith. I'm not a wood maker. I am doing it now myself, which is great. I learned from the process of watching Van do it.
Mm,
So that's also a part of, like, the endeavors, my artistic endeavors, to learn as much for myself as possible as well. And I'm doing stuff now with cement, um, too. So, but yeah, Van really was the one that helped construct that. So,
yeah, that is unique and special, and I admire anybody who even attempts to bring something like that to life. And I mean, you're clearly, I think I read that you are uh futuristic, and you're trying to describe in many ways where hip hop is heading. It's kind of like, where are we going? Like, where have we been, and where are we, and where are we going? And just through a thing like designing a chair, you're actually shaping the future. But beyond that, where do you think hip hop is going? Because right now, hip hop, um, for, I would say, the majority of the population, they would see it as the center of pop culture right now.
yeah,
But the hip hop that you're speaking of is the essential hip hop. It's the fundamental. It's the
right.
original hip hop. Yeah, let's just take it from the future backwards. Where is hip hop heading? Yeah, where are we going?
I truly think we can design from our experiences, just like any culture. We can design our environment the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That speaks to how we are as people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is normal. It happens. I think there's a lot of people, specifically too, um, black and brown folks in America, who walk into spaces that don't feel comfortable to them. And when they have the opportunity to do the, you know, urban landscaping and the design, it would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do believe like when you have some type of cultural connection with large groups of people and things like that are happening, you should be able to, you know, design where you feel comfortable living and how that functions and how that works, even society. You know, I think we all seek these things, and we
Mm-hmm.
look through history of this kind of fight of who was the dominant society at the time, and people who are, you know, thinking differently always tend to kind of break off and go somewhere else, or try to find their place while in this dominant society. It's a lot of push and pull, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but I do think hip hop, especially as you said, is a pretty large pop culture at this point. I think it's one of the loudest voices, artistic movements we've had in a long time, not just from America, but internationally, you know, worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should think about how that works within the rest of our, you know, life here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I'm heavily influenced by it, and
Mm-hmm.
at times I don't even realize the influences. And then
Yeah.
I speak to, somebody like yourself, and it's very enlightening, and it actually brings me this like deep sense of responsibility. I feel like, okay, we need to be paying attention here, because
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
this is what's guiding us right now. I mean, lyrics
Totally.
to music, the style of the music, the way that it's being presented, the way that it's being commercialized.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Yeah, it shows
yeah,
up in our
fascinating.
everyday. It shows up in our everyday. We're seeing it now in our ads. We're seeing where it's in our language. You know, people use the language, the fashion. It's all there. It's
Hmm.
all there.
Yeah, it's all there. You're totally
Mm-hmm.
right. And something that I'm very interested in is specifically, and this is why I gravitated towards breaking, was the athletic expression of it. I've always been fascinated with movement, and I love the uh, yeah, the athletics behind it. But I also realize that that is only one dimension of breaking.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I'm curious about, for example, now you were at Red Bull BC One this past weekend. I would say it's the biggest breaking event of the year, at least in production.
Yeah,
And I think you off air you called it the Disneyland of breaking, or
it
something like
definitely
that, right?
was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is hip hop alive and well at Red Bull BC One,
Yeah,
or
it's,
are we missing something?
to a certain extent, I would say. I wouldn't say it's like fully there, and I think it's not something that you can put in an event. You know, a lot of it has to deal with the people, and when you have an outside entity, and what I mean by that is maybe the company of Red Bull or whatever type of organization, um, you know, they try to fit it within their agenda as well, and it's hard to do that. It's almost impossible to do that. Like hip hop happens naturally. Whatever happens within the memories that we hold as like this was a dope moment. Um, it happens by people just gathering in a space and music playing most of the time, or just, you know, it's always some type of gathering. It's people coming together and doing their thing. And with an event, you know, that's very prefabricated. So
Hmm.
excuse me, you can still have the moments. Those will still happen for sure, but it's not guaranteed.
Hmm.
It's not guaranteed. You can even put the best people in the room. That doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen, you know. But events like that do create some moments, and they're powerful, and those are the things that really live on. You know, there's going to be some young person that was in that crowd that watched some of those battles, and just the same way that I saw, you know, the Breeze team performing in the street, it's going to empower them to do this for the rest of their life or be a part of it in some sort of way, in a big way.
Mm.
So
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt about it. And then we
mhm.
have the platform of the Olympics coming up. Yeah, what's your sense with breaking in the Olympics? Yeah, what do you think is going to happen, and what should we do?
Good question. What should we do? There's not too much we can do, I think. I think there's another, you know, agenda and movement towards what that's going to be, I don't think there's enough people that come from hip hop culture that are going to be calling the shots on that, unfortunately. I think we've made a good attempt in the past few years to try to really be a part of it on that level, but it may not happen. It may not happen. I also don't think it's going to be handled maybe properly, and it just might be a one and done. It might be like that. And if it is, like, that doesn't stop anything. Like, a lot of people see these opportunities as really large opportunities, but I've also seen 10 of those happen in the past 25 years.
Hmm.
And I'm not just
Yeah.
talking about Olympics. I'm talking about all these other different ways that hip hop has shown up in different platforms, and it doesn't do that much that people kind of think it does in terms of devastating or even moving it forward. It really doesn't, because there are people that are like doing other things all the time.
And I think for the culture, the community in general, it's just a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
I am close to a lot of people who have now invested their whole life in pursuing this path,
Mm.
and something that I am constantly encouraging them to look at is at the big picture, and realizing that, hey, the Olympics is 2 days and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And when you go all in on something like this, it can make you or break you. And I always
Mm.
say, not everybody's going to make it, but everybody can be successful. And
Yeah.
and being successful, being producing a succession, a progression. And in the continuum of hip hop, breaking specifically as an expression that has kind of come out of hip hop, um, what can we do to, one, guarantee the health and well-being of hip hop going forward, and two, empower those who have chosen a path that is more competitive, or yeah, that looks maybe like the Olympics or Red Bull BC1?
Hmm.
What can we do to empower them to kind of lean into the bigger picture, like really, yeah, sit within the foundation of hip hop as they express themselves there? Yeah, is there anything that comes to mind when I say that, or anything that comes up?
Yeah, a lot actually. I think for one, we all have to start meeting more and talking more. I think that's really important. I think there's a lot of players that play on different levels and lanes, and there may not always be a respect for each other. But I think if the more we talk and meet in that way, we can build that type of respect. I felt that a lot this past weekend, for example.
Mm,
Um, and the thing about, like, I think we have to go back to basics all the time. We have to remind ourselves that this dance makes you before it breaks you all the
mm,
time. It's a difficult uh, thing to do. Breaking in general is a very difficult thing to do. It's not something that has that much support. It's also not something that is nice to your body in a lot of ways, you know. But when I think about life and life in general, something that gets you up to move to any capacity, whether it be, I just feel like moving, I feel like jumping up and down, whatever. That's powerful. And that's really what it's about, to give you a goal, to focus on something, and to you know really do it. Like, that's, what more would you really want at that point? So
mm.
it's not, that's why, for me, it's never about winning or losing a competition or nothing like that. The fact that I needed to, like, get myself together to go do this thing, what else was driving me in my life to do that? you know
Yeah.
and then what is the opposite then of that? What are we doing? So the competitions and all these things, they're just there. They're not, nothing that I even think about necessarily. They're things for me to show up and meet other people and do the thing, whatever. But, like, what's driving me to do this thing? And that's the most powerful tool we have. And when we tap into that, the more we tap into that, you realize the health benefits, you realize the community building, you realize that stuff later on. And I think we need to just constantly remind people that that's really what this is.
Mm, beautifully said, and I think so powerful, because when it comes to competition or, an athletic career, it has an end.
Yeah,
There's a moment where you have to retire. Your body can no longer keep up. The young blood is coming up. They're taking your spot. It's
yeah,
over for you.
yeah.
And I mean, this happens in art as well. The
Mm-hmm.
artistry and is competitive as well. But the nature of evolution requires a level of self-awareness that you're talking about right now that is scary, because it requires you to ponder on your death or on the finite nature of who you are in this current iteration or form.
Mm-hmm.
But what I sense, and let me know if this is something that rings true to you, is that when you can pursue life from that place of passion, that thing that drives you, that makes you want to go to the Bronx, and as a 14-year-old to just break and dance,
Mm-hmm.
that it's there where the secret lies, where you can live in an infinite state of learning, growing, moving, um, creating, and it's finding that. And it sounds cliche, but it's the truest truth that I've found. And I'm just wondering, I know that you're mentoring and teaching, is what can we do to continue to redirect people, to remind them, hey, yeah, you're doing this thing, it's amazing, keep going, but the foundation is here. It's in the things that you truly care about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an open-ended question, but curious to hear your thoughts and where your mind is there when you're teaching or mentoring these days.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just constant reminders, constantly reminding them that this is not something that happens one time. This is a whole journey, you know. And then luckily, I have myself as an example for a lot of the things that I'm talking about, and I can say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing now. Like now I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to give you some advice of your dance, that things that I've experienced myself. If you're coming to me for mentorship, you probably have looked up to the things that I have done, and I feel really happy to share any of my experience with. But then I'm going to let you know too that I've thought about my death, and I also thought about your life. And through my death, you can live twice as much, and that's
Mm,
a thing that I think a lot of people have a hard time coming to grips with. And even when I speak to people, I hear them like I'm very much aware of like what's possible for me. And at this point too, it's more about other responsibilities and time that I have. So I'm 41 years old at this point. I feel great physically. There's nothing really slowing me down to that extent. But it's more about time and other things that I really want to do. And I know that like I don't really want to push myself to compete at a level at this age. I've already come to a point where I'm okay with not doing that, and it's because of the choices I made, from years back of, also setting up my life in a different way, because we have to also still think as artists and as breakers, what are we going to do financially and all these other things as well. So there's other things that I also speak to them about, because some of that is what the decisions are, and they feel like they're trapped into this it's like the boxing mentality. They're trapped into these, I need to keep boxing to maintain this life that I have, and they can't put it down,
right.
and that ultimately will be your demise, and it won't be a good ending. So I encourage them to think about how they want to end this story,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, that's a big one. Which
Yeah.
kind of leads to this conversation around money and art. How do you marry
Mhm.
those two?
I don't. I really
So they
don't.
they remain separate.
They do, because I generate money to create art. I've always done that. I've never had someone up until now, and maybe the past 5 years, invest in my art. I've always invested in my own. And I still feel that that's what I want to do, because you truly own that when it's yours. So I had no problem with working a regular job so I can continue to make art. I have no problem with that,
Mm-hmm.
and I take that money and I funnel it back into what I want to do, and I'm very confident in the time spent making the money too. I think people have a hard time with that. They're like, I want to break all day, you know, but what they don't realize too is that when you work, if you're working a 10 or 12-hour day, and even though you may be tired, the the being away from something that you really love, when you get time to do that, you're a lot more productive than you think, because that time now is limited, plus the energy of being away is heightened when you start to do it again. So you have to miss it. You have to learn how to miss it. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, when we go back to what we just said, it's going to be gone at some point. So start getting used to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know
That's
what I mean?
huge. That's
Hmm.
huge. You make such great points. Something that I was just sharing with uh, a group of breakers the other day that are on this kind of Olympic path is that
Hmm.
now they kind of ended their season, and until January they don't have to do anything. I'm encouraging them to really take this time to like chill, like miss breaking, because
Yes.
you're going to be in the grind of the competitive breaking from
Mm.
January until the Olympics if you make it there.
Yeah.
And it's going to make breaking miserable. And you need to draw, you're going to have to draw passion and care and love from a different place. And
Hmm.
this kind of is the time to do that. So, yeah, I think putting constraints on yourself allows you to become more productive. But of course, it's cyclical, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I am curious about money. So right now, like for example, you do teach every day. It sounds like so you're
Yeah.
full time teaching,
Yes. Yeah.
and you teach for various universities, or how does that go?
Yeah. I still have a class in the fall at Arizona State University, and it's a history of hip hop dance class, so it's more based on lecture.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm bringing that class now to Texas Tech, which is great. It's just a lot of my own research on hip hop dance as a whole, but then also it gives me the opportunity to bring in people who really do this and who are some people who are looked at as pioneers of the dance. I think one of my main reasons of being in the university is to be able to connect the community to what's going on here, especially if they want to have hip hop in the university. I think that's important. So I do that. Also teach a breaking class, which is great. I also teach improvisation, teach music for dance. So it kind of goes across the board of some of the stuff that I'm already interested in, which is great. Not
Mm-hmm.
all my students are necessarily hip hop dancers though either. So you know, understanding like where they're coming from, but then also giving them a taste of like what this is, and also talking to them about it in a way that they respect this to the same level that they might respect something like ballet,
Mm-hmm.
is important to me too. And putting it on this platform in a university makes it that. Now, does it belong here? I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if even this is something that we should be doing, but I do believe it's something that is needed because of how hip hop is viewed in the public sphere. So if it
Mm-hmm.
shows up in places like universities, if people write about it more, this society gives credit and value to certain things that in hip hop we don't look at all the time. But I think people now are starting to understand why it is important to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already been
Yeah.
on this the past 7 years. So I'm trying to like, find my way in it, but then also not lose my way in it, because I know it may not be fully supported. And it might not be, at least I know, in my lifetime. So I am the first person coming through a door and getting shot, which I don't mind. And again, here's my awareness. of that. So I know how to treat it. I know how to prepare the next person, and I'll be a sacrificial lamb. It's all good because I have my hands always in other things. I don't ever put my full intent into something that I feel like it's not a safe place to be in that way.
Hmm.
So I take care of myself and I take care of
That's
the
huge.
art, and I have to, move accordingly.
And this is actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because you're so well thought out and there's so many layers to your expression, yet your expression in nature, when you see it, is very simple. It's very
Yeah.
clear, concise, and compelling. And I think this is something that is simply out of people's awareness when it comes to people who break or dance or who express themselves as artists, that they just see like, oh, look how creative that person is. But have you noticed how well thought out they are, how
Yeah.
they've really gone through the iterative process of thinking about all the layers and all the perspectives, and this being exactly what we need at this moment. I think more than ever, we need to wake up and become aware of how things work, and
Hmm.
the only way we can do it is by becoming autonomous. And it sounds like to me, and this is my perception of you, is that you, at the core of who you are as an artist, you are using the medium of teaching, the platform of academia, um, to help people become more autonomous, to find mastery in their process, and to tie in some kind of purpose and allow it to
Yeah.
mechanically work with the systems at B, but also potentially with the intention of breaking those systems, creating new ones.
Yeah. Yeah, which very much goes against the institution's longevity.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Because
a bit
academia
of
is
an anti.
expensive,
Oh
right?
yeah,
It's like,
100%.
right?
It's
So,
expensive. It's not a place that anyone can find themselves in. It's limited. There's a lot to it. It's also, as a multidisciplinary artist too, I find myself sometimes I don't want to be caught up in one thing. You can't have me here just teaching breaking. I'm not going to do it.
mhm.
You know
What do you
that
enjoy teaching the most?
it has to be all of it together. I think I love everything equally, even if I'm just talking about what dancers should be doing to further their careers in terms of, like, how they get their websites together, how they promote themselves. I love talking about that too. It's all relative and important to me. um and I spend a lot of time on pretty much everything. I think we have to always kind of open it up, the conversations, like, the formats of things, especially here in universities, like they're too one way, and it doesn't serve everything to me. Even events, man, even the events I go to, and people say, oh, the culture's here. I'm like, is it? You know, you have one workshop, people take that workshop, lasts maybe an hour and 30 minutes. They go home, they got all the knowledge of the culture. I highly doubt it, you know? So there's a lot more we have to do. There's a lot more connecting we have to do so we can use these limited platforms to get the conversation started. But then there's other things that we need to start doing to connect people a little bit more and open up the
Hmm.
conversation to other things.
Have you found resistance in
Yeah.
terms of what you're doing right now? Yeah. What are you hearing? What are the things that are coming up that are kind of pushbacks right now for you?
I think it's my format at times. I don't follow a traditional professorship. I think in the way that I even conduct my class. You know, um, I'm also someone who has studied. Like, I studied the Bauhaus, for example, a
Hmm.
lot, and um, learning by doing is a huge component for me. So anything that's based on rubric, especially for my class, and because I have many levels in my class, and maybe people have never done this movement before in their life, I have to assess each one separately. You know, so participation is the key, and wherever you start at in my class and where you end is what I'm looking at. But I can't give you some sort of, like, rubric that's going to be one and great for everyone. That's not the case because everyone's an individual. This is like a hip hop thought, man. There's a lot of things in hip hop that we are very communal, but at the same time, we understand this individualism in a different way. So
Hmm.
I do feel like the attention sometimes from students, even because they're used to a certain format. So when they're in class, they're like, I don't like, how are you even grading us on some of this stuff? And I'm like, we can talk about it if you want to know, you know?
Hmm.
And then I'll tell them straight up how I assessed them. I was like, well, I looked at you in the beginning of class. You were doing this technique, a certain way. Now you understand your body weight a little bit differently. Am I right? And they'll say yes or no. I'll be like, okay, how do you feel in terms of the way that you're moving now compared to you moved before? And it's great. And so I can still conduct the class kind of the way I want. I'm just usually, feeling, and these are conversations that I'm sure they're happening behind, closed doors, but like maybe faculty in certain places that I've been have been like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing maybe, or, he has not really done this in the way that we do things here. So, but I mean, it doesn't, hey. I'm pretty confident. I mean, look at my students. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. If you want to know who's a good teacher, look at their students. Look at what they're producing. I don't, a grade doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't. As a professor, I should not be saying things like that. You know what I mean? But I try to get them to see outside of that too. Yeah.
Something, yeah, I agree. I've always said that true human performance is measured by feel, and when it feels right in your head and your heart and your gut, then you are usually trending in the right directions, and you start to produce the numbers, whatever grades, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what I'm trying to say is that it's connecting with that which you're thinking, that which you are feeling as that which drives you, like you said, and ultimately how your body is expressing itself and the
Yeah.
health and well-being of it. And when you learn to perform by feel, and now you start to produce practical mechanical outcomes, expressions that are technical, that can be measured, and somebody can come in and assess it and say it's this or that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how somebody defines your expression, it's how you feel about it and the impact that it makes, which I think really comes down to human connection.
Right.
So I just love that you're saying this, because I'm like, yes, this, come on, I need to hear this from an artist, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I come from a place of more technical expression, technical performance. I'm constantly thinking about how do we get you a little bit closer to where you want to go, but I also know that the nature of creativity and artistry is what's driving it all. So it's I'm also a bullshit artist, by by doing the things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you're saying this, and it's allowing me to think different. Which kind of leads me to your thesis, your master's. It was around rhythm, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was thinking about it this morning before jumping on here with you, and I was thinking, is maybe the thing why not is trying to show us is that if we can access the rhythm of life, then everything's going to work out. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's all about timing. So even when I'm dancing, man, I'm showing that there's a way of existing within a environment and calling attention to things, um, you know, really controlling a moment. It's like if you think about life, it's the same thing, you know. Like I used to think about, like, there was times I would just really have some sort of anxious feeling or energy towards something that, now that I've been through the experience of it, I'm like, why was I acting like that?
Mhm.
Or if I knew I was going to make it to the age of 40, I wouldn't have made those decisions. Stuff like that. And it's like, the truth is, we don't know. We don't. But there's some sort of power in having faith And this goes back to the religion thing I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is a universal word, whether whatever religion you follow. But this idea of just knowing and understanding and having this, complete confidence about your own personal life, and then the people around you will feel that as well, and you can connect with them in a way, you move with faith. So that's all
Mm-hmm.
timing to me. It's like, knowing when to react, when not to react. Does everything
Mm-hmm.
need your attention in that way? Um, Also, when you feel something, is it time? Is it time for that? Like, are you supposed to be doing this right now? Yeah, it's all about that. Rhythm is a heavy component to everything, and I think in my thesis I was trying to really get to that point, and but it also spoke. I spoke to it mainly like artistically about how I can move through different mediums. Like I look at everything in a similar way, but really it is a metaphor for life for sure in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you said that rhythm is the common denominator of hip hop and creative practices.
Yeah, that's something that one of my early mentors, Pop Master Fable, mentioned that those exact words to me. Really his words, and
Mm-hmm.
rhythm is a common denominator. What he means by that is that you can see rhythm within certain elements of visual art, and if you can see them, it translates into something that you do physically, and vice versa. you
Mm-hmm.
know so when you understand that there's a rhythmic pattern within something visually, when you understand that there's a rhythmic pattern within something sonically, there's a rhythmic pattern in a movement or a combination of steps, that's it. You can speak across those lines based on that. So now you're not looking at the step, now you're not looking at the graffiti letter, now you're not listening to just a tenor saxophone, you're listening to rhythm, you're seeing rhythm, you're feeling and doing rhythm with your body. So it opens up
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in my head, I'm getting these visuals. I see rhythm as like the DNA of expression, but it's also almost like the rhythm is the scaffolding that you use to build the thing that you're creating.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you have to start with the rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah. Even
Mm.
when you think about like conversation and how when you have a good conversation, it feels good. There was a rhythm
Mm-hmm.
to it. Like there was the way, the back and forth, it worked. It was like great. Um, could be into the way you deliver a sentence. How you say it one way versus how you say it another can give a completely different feel. If you see it in all the things, it starts to really make sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I see it and I feel it. It's amazing, and it's something that I'm now even more curious about exploring. And I remember somebody actually attended a seminar of mine probably like 7 or 8 years ago, and they came to me to talk about. They came to the seminar because they wanted to see what I knew about rhythm, and I realized I know nothing about rhythm. I was just unaware of rhythm, and although I've thought about it and explored it and I logically get it, there's so much more to it
Yeah.
that needs to be revealed. And I'm glad there are people like yourself out there talking about it, expressing it, sharing it, and willing to do it in an arena like academia right now, which
Yeah.
is very dogmatic.
Yeah. And it's fun and it's exciting to have this kind of format here because I got kind of tired of the one-off workshops, when I would go to events. Here we have a semester, right? We have 15 weeks, 30 classes with people. You really can get into a
Hmm.
subject and spend some time. So I would really love for, breaking or anyone who wants to learn anything hip hop wise to have a similar experience. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm like really preparing my place. I have a studio now. I just moved into. I'm gonna start opening that up in January to people who want to, really take some time and make an in depth, um, you know, I would say experience or you know take a dive into something that they've always wanted to learn. And if it's from me, fantastic, because I say that too because like if they want to come and learn something from me, they can, or if they simply want to work on a project, I have resources for them. So I have a large studio space, I have cameras, I have music equipment, I have whatever they need to create whatever it is they want. So,
Mm, that's special. So it's like a creative space, and this is in Texas.
yep, it's in Lubbock, Texas. Yeah. This is my Bauhaus,
Beautiful.
man. I'm making it. This is the learning by doing situation that I was talking about, and I want to get, people in there and really getting busy, man. Like really creating the things that are in their minds.
Wow. I
Hmm.
can't wait to visit. That would be amazing to
Yeah,
come out there and
that'd be great. Totally,
and check it out.
you're
Yeah.
welcome to come
Uh,
by.
h- Thank you. I
Hmm.
appreciate it. Yeah. How can people support you? Is there anything people can do to support your ventures and that which you're teaching or spreading the message?
I don't know, like my posts on Instagram. No, I mean, they can maybe just spread the word to people that they know are interested in doing something like that. I'm gonna make that a little more public pretty soon. I mean, I just moved in that space, so I'm really getting it ready for what I'm about to do. But I'll have it open in January, and right now it's just going to be 2 years. So I have the space for 2 years, and I'm going to really push and promote that as much as possible. Um, but yeah, if you want to support what I'm doing, just maybe just inquire of how we can work together. I'm really serious about collaboration. That's the biggest thing for me. Like even that chair venture, to me, anything that I do with my art, I want it to be collaborative, you know, because I do feel like that's what helps things move forward as well. And I do a lot of things too. And I was just talking about this the other day with other artists in a way where I say, if you feel like I can help you in your artistry, I'm going to ask you then to do something for me as well for whatever it is that you do. It's more like just a trade. We're not going to deal with money at all, you know? And I have all the
Hmm.
equipment and stuff like that to make whatever people want so they can come through. We'll build it for them, but then I'm going to ask them to do something for me. And it might be simply as like, come and talk to my students because most of the time they're artists in their own right. So I want them to come by and share their knowledge with my students, or you know, if there's anything other skill that they have and it fits within a project that I'm working on, I'll ask them to help me out. So I think it's cool, like really starting different conversations with this whole thing.
I like it. I
Yeah.
really, as you're saying this, I was like, I really hope why notism becomes a thing that people recognize.
Mm,
Yeah, it's worthy of being a movement that people can adhere to, weave in and out of, and kind of ride like a wave, and that allows you to continue to express yourself creatively for the rest of your days.
mm.
I'm very inspired by this. Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing. Yeah,
Thanks
if
for
you have any
having me.
final thoughts or anything that you would like to share, feel free.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I look forward to working with you in the future, Carl. So we got to really talk about what we can do. Definitely come out to
Hmm.
to Texas too and see what I got going on here. I think it could really benefit some of the stuff you're doing as well. So maybe we can figure out something along those lines.
I
Um,
would love it.
yeah, and yeah, just I'm gonna direct everyone, I guess, to my website. Whynotism.com. That's YNOTISM.com. That's a place that I'm gonna most likely shift everything. I mean, at some point, I might leave social media. Even I don't know. But my website will continue. I talk a lot about that with my artists too. I think, as you see now, Instagram is doing these kind of subscriber type things, but in all actuality, there are no platforms that truly serve artists completely. And I think they need to think about that, not only financially, but like, how the algorithms go. And if you're not producing what people want to see now, they'll start to promote something else. So you
Hmm.
have to have your own space. And I think a website is a great place to do that. And if you're multifaceted, it's not like you have to follow only one square image every time you post. You can make, images, you can make podcasts, you can have videos, you can have it all on one platform. So
Yep.
check out my website where all my other things are, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
You have a nice portfolio there of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was checking it out a couple of days ago and really appreciated it. And I also saw that you've, without opening another can of worms here, that you ventured into the NFT space a little bit,
Yeah.
and that thus you have some, knowledge of the crypto space. I do think that the blockchain for artists is going to be the place, and to have one hub that has all your stuff,
Yeah.
but that is completely open for people to connect, and where there can be an exchange of value, that produces an influx of resources, the place to share resources and
Hmm.
record
Hmm.
your moves is going to be huge. And I think websites living on the blockchain, basically, which is just saying uh, Web3,
Hmm.
uh, is, I think, something that artists really need to start to lean into, because they're going to be the first.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Let them know,
amazing.
Carl. They gotta
Yeah, so
know.
if you're in the NFT space, go mint some of Why Not's NFTs. I think the floor price is point 0.2 ETH or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, that's where it's at. I haven't put too much more energy into that in a while, but I will soon. I like to get involved with movements and things that are happening just to understand them. You know, I don't consider myself an
Hmm.
opportunist because I don't never really fully invest in those things. I invest in it enough to get to understand what's happening. I don't want to be the next big NFT artist. That's not my goal. If I can, gain some, income from it, sure, that's fantastic. But
Hmm.
it's not something that I'm aiming to do. But I just want to see what's going on because I'm always trying to understand, what people are doing and where they're going. And when I see that, it benefits
Yeah.
everything that I do, especially here at the university, where I can, truly speak to my students or anybody else I may mentor in the scene and tell them, hey, look, this is something you should think about. Let me explain to you how it works because I've done the research. I've used myself as a guinea pig, so to speak, and now I have the knowledge and I can bring that to you. And this is my assessment of what I think about it. You know,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I think speaking from experience is a place where, yeah, you can't go wrong, and your confidence, yeah, can't be
yeah,
shaken. Why not? Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here, and I hope everybody who listened, yeah, just got a glimpse of what a creative mind sounds like and looks like, and what it can do. And I look forward to more conversations with you in the future.
yeah. Let's do this again sometime, Carl. We got a lot of stuff that we could have went even further with.
I know. I feel like
So
we could have gone for like hours, but we'll,
I'm
we'll we'll
sure.
call it at this. We'll
Mm,
let people get a taste, and then we'll keep it going.
there you go. Part one.
Thank you, man. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks.